The Mimic, explained. In the novels, the Mimic was a machine built by Edwin Murray as a way to keep his son entertained, so he could work and sleep properly. It ran of the Mimic One program, designed to learn and mimic whatever it sees, hears, etc. Over time, it learned how to read, write in a made-up language that vaguely resembled hieroglyphics, signaled that it wanted ice cream, and learned how to mimic several chores. It was also eventually given legs so it could more easily accompany David. One day, David was killed by a driver who wasn't paying attention to the road. Edwin fell into a grief-induced depression, barely doing anything for 2 weeks. But when he saw Mimic imitating the way David used to ask for ice cream, in a fit of grief-stricken rage, he battered the robot. Sometime later, Edwin abandoned the factory due to Edwin's breach of contract in not supplying new animatronic performers. Fazbear Entertainment sent a team to collect anything useful from the old factory. When they never came back, they sent another team. Unfortunately for both teams, the Mimic had survived Edwin's assault and had now learned to mimic violence and brutality. It had begun killing in increasingly brutal ways, slamming heads into walls, tearing out the brain, hanging people like coats, ripping through the solar plexus, reaching for the throat, and tearing out the trachea from the inside. It also mixed its old mimicry with the new violent one, hiding the bodies as if it were doing chores. It had also begun wearing the suits around the factory, due to seeing Edwin and David dress up in one of them, along with David putting costumes over other endoskeletons. Eventually, Fazbear Entertainment got their hands on the Mimic and began attempting to mass-produce the Endo. They upgraded the Mimic with a voice modulator and the ability to contract, extend, contort, and rearrange its endoskeleton. It's possible that it was also given the extra appendages seen on the Tiger Rock animatronic, as they have the same endoskeleton. Unfortunately, once they began using the Mimic One program, the Endos began acting in ways they weren't supposed to. Scared of a potential disaster, they deactivated the remaining Mimics and put them in storage. Decades later, during the construction of the Pizzaplex, a crew of workers were tasked with cleaning out the endoskeletons from the FNAF6 pizzeria. One of the workers, named Gil, grew tired of the tedious work and went on break. While on break, he notices the delivery of the new Glamrock endoskeletons, but one of them is out of place. It was the original Mimic. Old, dirty, and seemingly burnt as if it had survived a fire. Gil takes it back to the FNAF6 location and repurposes it to break off the limbs and heads of the endoskeletons, which works but also causes it to attack anything resembling an endoskeleton, which includes humans and humanoid dolls. Couple that with its already violent behavior, and it's not hard to guess what happened next. During the ensuing massacre, one was able to alert the construction crew and had them seal the entrance to the pizzeria. It should also be worth noting that the Mimic has been modified further, giving it rabbit ears and the ability to disrupt any electronics in its vicinity. It also now has the power to tap into radio signals and communicate via devices like radios or walkie-talkies. After some time, 8 teens break into the old pizzeria and become trapped with the Mimic. It begins picking them off, one by one, tearing them apart as if they were endoskeletons. IT was also seen slowly getting smarter, attempting to trick the teens using its vocal mimicry to set a trap for them. It also eventually learns to use the vents and its electronic description ability to get the jump on the teens. As well as using its old habit of wearing suits whenever it sees one, regardless of if there's a person inside or not, leading to a particularly brutal death. Sometime after the Pizzaplex is constructed, the board notices that they aren't meeting their required profit margins, so they come up with a plan to fire the writing team and replace it with an SC that can write stories for free. One of the board members, Edwin Murray, objects to the idea but is largely disregarded, and despite his reluctant involvement in the project, most of the details are kept hidden from him. Eventually, he finds out that they plan to use the Mimic One program for the storyteller tree and a Mimic endoskeleton for the main attraction, encased in an animatronic shell themed after the tiger plush that David used to love. Mimic One program is hooked up to the entire Pizzaplex, which both affects the Glamrock animatronics personalities, but also allows the Mimic from underground to access the system too. That will be important later. Over the next several days, Edwin repeatedly sneaks into the storyteller tree and investigates. Catching on to this, Another board member locks him inside and lets him suffocate to death. A few days later, this board member, named Mr. Burrows, sneaks into the tree to investigate. Believing Edwin may have escaped, he finds Edwin's body and a myriad of papers with Edwin's writing on them. Mr. Burrows is then locked in the tree and dies as well. Finally, after one more incident involving the Tiger Rock animatronic ripping a kid's arms off, it is deactivated, and the storyteller tree taken down. And no longer active within the system. The Mimic 1 program simply watches through the cameras of the Pizzaplex, getting smarter. Eventually, through some unknown means, the Mimic that's trapped underground finds its way further underground, and is eventually sealed and contained by the Mix's system, believed to be built by Vanny after she and Glitchtrap used the Glamrock animatronics to excavate the old pizzeria. The Mimic's story is not over yet, as there are 2 more books yet to come. Hopefully they should shed some light on how the Mimic became trapped and lost its ears. Eventually, an incident occurs where a blob of remnant and liquid metal tunnels out of the underground, destroying the Pizzaplex. The Mimic somehow gets a message out to one of Gregory's friends. Don't ask how, I don't fucking know, named Cassie, mimicking Gregory's voice to lure her to the ruined Pizzaplex, manipulating her into disabling the Mix's program and setting it free. After the Mix's system is shut down, the Mimic attempts to kill Cassie as it did the others, but Roxy is able to buy her some time to run. Finally, Cassie is able to get to the elevator, the doors to which break of one of Mimic's arms. After this, Gregory crashes the elevator, trapping Cassie underground with Roxy finding her. For now, that is the end of Mimic's story. I'm sure you have some questions as to why I didn't add Glitchtrap's story to the Mimics. That was for one simple reason. They are the same. Let me explain. Glitchtrap is first seen in Help Wanted after unidentified circuit boards were scanned into the game. Upon entering the game, he immediately begins observing the game testers. One eventually catches his eye by the name of Jeremy, who he tries to communicate with. Jeremy begins experiencing nightmares and sickness, eventually going into a state of numbness where he barely reacts to anything. It's also noted he seemed drained or exhausted. This eventually leads to Jeremy slicing his own face off with a paper slicer. Moving on to Tape Girl, being the next tester. Tape Girl makes 16 tapes explaining Jeremy's story as well as the misdeeds of FAZENT and the actions of Glitchtrap. She eventually tries to erase him, but he attaches himself to her tapes so he can't be erased. So instead, she ran a fragmentation program on the tapes to break him into 16 pieces. This effectively contained Glitchtrap since he was attached to the files containing the tapes. This seemed to work until another dev team picked up development. Eventually, a beta tester called Vanessa and unwittingly reassembles the tapes and Glitchtrap along with them. As Glitchtrap begins to try and merge with her, she follows the instructions left behind by Tape Girl to try and hard reset the game and erase him. She is partially successful. I say partially because he was still able to infect her mind with his virus and create a new persona he can talk to and control. Glitchtrap also seemed to take some level of pride in what he did, dancing as Vanessa was in the Freddy suit and frequently waving at her while she played. This is quite different from the Mimic, as it never enjoyed what it did. It just did so because of its programming and moved on. Another difference between Glitchtrap and Mimic is the fact that Glitchtrap was smart enough to attempt and partially succeed in a digital consciousness transference. Mimic was smart enough to trick people, but even Cassie grew suspicious of it at some points. There's one final piece of evidence before we move on from FNAFVR. That is the fact that Glitchtrap seems to have unique knowledge of William's crimes, including how he was able to lure Gabriel away, something Mimic would have no clue about if its only source of info into Afton's life was the game. I say this because it only had access to a series of minigames with little in terms of details or lore. It wouldn't have known how William acts, kills, or even about the original Spring Bunny suit that Glitchtrap uses as an avatar. It wouldn't know about any of this. Final piece of evidence is that while Mimic was plugged into the Pizzaplex system via the Storyteller tree, Glitchtrap was plugged into the company's system by Vanny, and later the Pizzaplex system as well, also by her. For now though, I have said all I came to say. We'll likely get more answers in the last 2 books, but for now I've covered just about everything. Goodbye.